everyone's really friggin' awkward because they don't know if they have to try and be cool. They don't know if they can like let their inner nerd flag fly. But everyone's exhausted. Nobody wants to be freaking polite anymore or peppy. So for the first floor meeting, I was a goofball. And I said the most inappropriate things. I dropped the F-bomb all over the place. I made a penis joke, I'm sure. And they all thought I was ridiculous, but then that sort of loosened them up a little bit. And they started cracking jokes. And then they started being a little more outgoing, and they were willing to share their thoughts.
For me personally, I think the thing that I brought the most into it was definitely to communicate honestly. And I think that's where most of the conflicts in my hall freshman year came from, was people just weren't open about it.
Sources, we sort of came up with, here's a list of things you guys should talk about and write down. And I did my best to use my experience to influence them to be like, you guys should probably talk about X, Y, or Z, because those are things that came up for me that I didn't anticipate. Like, I didn't know I was going to open the door and see my roommate's dildo on the floor. So you guys might want to talk about keeping personal items to yourselves.
It's just very important to take it seriously, and it's also very important to stress that it's a living, breathing document, and that they can go back to it whenever they want. And when I've managed conflicts between roommates, that's always what I would bring out. I'd bring out the roommate agreement and say, listen guys, this is what you have down, but this was within the first week when you were here at school, let's rewrite this.
The thing that I looked for the most was that they have a way to communicate problems. Now, I think people always come in with these expectations that do change quite a bit. The important thing is whether or not they have in the list, well, how do we deal with it when it does change?
And it's not necessarily the resulting document that's important, but the process they go through of asking each other, what are your priorities, what are my priorities, let's really talk about this in depth. So I looked just to see that they had really talked to each other and thought things through. And there were a couple community or roommate agreements that were turned into me that I gave back and told them to make better because they weren't thorough enough. I mean, the ideal community agreement would be pretty straightforward and thorough.
It's more of, making sure you're clear about the policy, but for me, I tried to use it for them to get to know me, what I expected of them, and then also to make them feel like they needed to expect things of each other. I try to emphasize the idea of the community. If you put your trash, your pizza boxes in the bathroom trash, the girl across the hall from me would sit outside on her cell phone at 3 in the morning talking very loudly to her boyfriend, normally fighting. You are hurting everyone by doing stuff like that, so let's work together.
But it's really important that your residents understand not only that they have the right to create their own environment, but they also are responsible for upholding that environment.
Actually challenging them to, have mechanisms in place for when things go wrong.
Just putting in place how you're going to handle situations.
But if people don't do this and that trash stays there, what do we do,
It's very important to get every single resident to sign it so that they're bound by the community agreement. Don't make that mistake. Fortunately, I never had problems with my community, but I always made sure to have everyone sign it just in case.
Realizing that it's a fluid document, so that if things don't work out.
Definitely talk with the other RAs in your building.
So there needs to be a lot of communication and coordination between the RAs about when they're planning things like quiet hours and things like cleaning up the common spaces. And I think that's probably the most important thing.